All right, welcome everybody. So looks like we are starting with a slight delay. Can everybody see my slides? Do you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it seems like we're having some trouble with our WebEx. Actually, is having some trouble right now. We're looking into it, but yeah, at least we have several people in the room. And I would say, for the sake of yeah, we are also streaming through YouTube, so hopefully you can see this. So I quickly start, and so we don't lose too much time. So if you can see my screen, welcome to CARDIS 2020. So it's a 19th edition of the Smart Card Research and Advanced Applications Conference, and it's the first time we are doing a virtual event. And obviously we have a very fancy venue, as you can see at the picture. That's where I am right now. I actually was planning to do this from my desk, but unfortunately, yes, I can't re-enter the call. So we have live streaming on YouTube, and I hope the people who are not here right now can use that instead, so that at least you can enjoy the talks and so on until the WebEx problems are resolved. Also, we already had presentations available before the start of the conference, and people are joining. That's additional joining, and that's great. So you had a chance to look at those already. We have actually the biggest CARDIS yet. If we count the registrations, we already have more than 250 registrations from 28 countries. A few examples are given here. And it's continuing, right, because people can still register if they want to. We have, so for the venue, we actually prepared three main tools that you can use. The first one is GatherTown. GatherTown is an online conference tool that allows for great social interaction. It provides a conference feeling, and you can also use it for a very efficient hallway track. So it's basically great for doing an online conference, and I've already saw that many of you are trying it out. It's great. You can reach all other sites, including the live video stream, which is hosted in WebEx. That's where we are right now, so you can see it in the live room. There are video sessions if you want to see the pre-recorded videos. There are sponsor booths, and there's also a social area. The second tool, that's the one that is giving us trouble right now, is WebEx, which is usually a very reliable tool. Where we will host the main track. We will have the keynotes here in a few moments, and the Q&A sessions and everything else. And it's also live streamed to YouTube. So I hope, at least for the ones who didn't make it into the room, they can actually enjoy it via YouTube. Finally, as a last tool, as a chat tool, classical chat tool, we have the MetaMouse system, which is similar to Zulip or Slack, which you might know from other conferences or from your daily work. And it's also a possibility for authors and speakers to interact using chat. There's, more details follow in the next slides. So first of all, GatherTown, that's the system, the online conference tool, which you can see on the pictures here, where you can walk around. If you activate mic and video, you can directly interact with people that are close to you. You can also attend the main track in the WebEx room. And if you go through GatherTown and you press the X button to enter you will be shown a link where you can enter the WebEx room for the live presentations, and that also automatically mutes you and shows you as inactive in GatherTown. So that's quite convenient. Each session has a separate video room where you can watch the videos, and we have also asked the authors to stick around after their Q&As in GatherTown, so you have a chance to live interact with them. Finally, as you can see here on the example pictures, we have the sponsor booths available as well, where you can check out what our sponsors are up to. And finally, following the good example of last year's CARDIS, we will have a virtual bar open throughout the entire conference, so you can always go to the bar and interact with other people there if you want. So for the user interface, I guess many might be familiar. On the right-hand side, you can see all the participants. If you want to meet someone, you can move around in the virtual venue with the cursor buttons. If you want to locate someone special, you click on you can activate location here. Then you will be shown a red line here. I try to locate Tore, and you can just follow the line to see the person and interact with the person. You can change your avatar here. You can increase and decrease the area where people can hear you with this button. You can even share your screen. And if you want to interact with a booth or with other things in GatherTown, you just press the X button. You will also be shown that option here. The second tool of interaction is MetaMost, the chat server. As you can see, we have created for each session we have a channel. You can enter channels here. You can also start direct messages with participants that are registered here through the system as well. Also, if you have technical problems, you can go to the tech support and get some support. That's also a channel. You can get the support over here. The main presentation is running in WebEx. The ones who are in this room right now, for them it worked out fine. I hope I will be able to join via my usual interface in a moment as well. Please, if you have questions, you can unmute yourself and just ask the question. During the Q&A, if many people are asking questions at the same time, please raise your hand and then the chairs will ask you to unmute to ask the questions. And finally, you can also, if you do not want to ask via the audio channel, you can ask through MetaMost. As I mentioned before, the speakers were asked to also stick around in GatherTown afterwards, so you can directly interact with them through that. Let me come to the conclusion slowly. I would like to thank our sponsors. We have 5 sponsors this time, and actually through their support, they made it possible that we could offer free registration for all participants. I'm very happy about that. So please check out their booths. Finally, I would like to give a big thank you to the local organization team here at the University of Lübeck, Tore, Ines and Florian, who have put in a lot of effort in advance to get all the tools working, testing out the tools, and even creating, architecting the venue in GatherTown, for example. So very special thank you for that. And without further ado, I hope you can enjoy CARDIS. I hope it will be you will have a lot of fun. And with that, I would like to pass on to Nele and Pilou, who will introduce the venue and the program. Sorry.
Yes. See my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So welcome also from our side. Yeah, it was an honor to be program chair together with Yahibal, who recently recently joined Restart. So my name is Nele Mentens, and I'm affiliated with Leiden University and KU. Yeah. So about the submissions and the review process. So we had 26 submissions this year. We had 32 program committee members. Everybody did their work very well. So we had 4 reviews per submission. Afterwards, there was an online discussion and also convergence of the decisions. We decided to accept 12 papers, which is 46% of all submissions. And 4 of those 12 papers were accepted after shepherding. So it was a conditional acceptance. And then I pass on the word to you.
Yes, so we ask authors to pre-record a video of about 25 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, that you can find a link on this video on the program. Okay, so the way we will have the sessions today is by first having live speeches for each author of 5 minutes. And then we will have in the remaining of the session a Q&A session. Okay, so these 4 sessions are supposed to last 50 minutes, including the free speech and the question and answer. So we have today two keynote speakers, Jorn and Nadia, and 2 sessions. The first session will be on post-quantum crypto, and the second session on efficient implementations. And tomorrow we will start also with a keynote by Hannes Molsen, and we will have 2 sessions about physical attacks. And then around 5, if I will remember, we will have the sponsor sessions where sponsor will come or you can go to the booth of sponsor to ask questions and so on. That's the program of these 2 days. Nela?
Yeah.
So we have this year, again, last year, the best student paper award that we ask program committee to vote for, and these are the three papers that we selected with Neller. So these are these three: optimized software implementation for lightweight encryption scheme, fork AE. And the second paper is a fast compact RISC-V, accelerator for ASCON and friends. And the last paper is lightweight post-quantum key encapsulation for 8-bit AVR microcontrollers. So we will announce the winner in the closing session tomorrow at 7:50.
For the PC members that didn't cast their vote yet, we already received some votes, but if you haven't voted yet, only for program committee members, then you received an email of us. You can still reply to that email until tomorrow noon.
Yeah.
Please do so. Right.
Okay.
Stop sharing.
So now we're ready to start with Thomas, the keynote, the first keynote.
Yes, I have to stop
I think.
sharing my screen. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for the
Yes.
sharing rights.
So our first keynote speaker is Jörn Eichler, and Jörn is responsible for security engineering of vehicle systems and Volkswagen passenger cars. And he is also leading the working group on secure systems engineering at the Institute of Computer Science at the Freie Universität Berlin. And he will speak today about automotive security for security challenges. So Jörn, the floor is yours. Any more questions? Don't be shy. You can also unmute your microphone if you want to speak instead of putting it in the chat. And if not, our time is also almost up. So then I would like to say thank you again, Jörn, for giving this very interesting talk. And as you said already, you have the next meeting to attend, so we won't block you to much longer. But yeah, if you have more questions for Jörn, I think you're open to be contacted. And
yeah, looking forward to it. And for all kinds of discussion points and input, I would be grateful. And thanks again from my side, and greetings from Berlin. Having a good conference for the next hours and days.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So I think we're having a 1-minute break now, right? Yes. At 3:10, there will be the next session.
Yeah, but we have 10 minutes break, I think, no?
At 3:10, there will be the next session.
At 3:10, yes.
Yeah,
you're right.
there will be 10 minutes.
So I would recommend for those who want to attend the next session to stay in the room if possible, because so a few people are saying that there are still some problems. Cisco has announced that they have applied a patch and they are watching it right now, whether it worked out. I hope so. Like I said, if you want to attend the next session, it might be good to stay in the room. Maybe just mute the screen while you're taking a break, getting some coffee.
I think we don't have our session chairs yet.
Okay, then I think we can start with the first session and with the second talk of the session. Just as a note, this will be a 5-minute pitch of the paper, and then after the pitch, there will be the opportunity to ask questions. Questions can either be written into the Mattermost chat, they can be written into the chat of WebEx, or the person who wants to ask a question can raise the hand with a WebEx feature, or turn on the camera, and then we will unmute and the question can be asked using the microphone. I'm very happy to chair this session with Peter Schwabe.
Hello, also from me. And maybe one more thing. So please, if you're not muted yet, so I just heard somebody still speaking, but please mute yourselves during the talk.
Yeah, and I think without any further talk by us, we can start with the pitch.
Yeah, okay, so thank you very much. I'm sorry that you cannot see me. It seems there is a problem on my side because my WebEx app just crashed before, and now it does not let me use the cam anymore. But anyway, so good afternoon to all. So I'm Johann. I'm giving a short pitch of our paper on lightweight post-quantum key encapsulation for 8-bit AVR microcontrollers. And this is joint work with Hao Zhang, who is sitting next to me right now, Peter Rönne and Peter Ryan. So I have basically 5 slides. I will quickly go over them. So as we all know, we are now approaching the era of quantum computing, which means that within the next maybe 5 to 10 years, we will have to replace the whole public key infrastructure of the internet by algorithms that can resist attacks carried out by quantum computers. And this raises a number of research problems and challenges. And one such research problem or challenge is to look at how well the current proposals for post-quantum crypto systems are suited for resource-constrained devices, so devices that we use in the Internet of Things, so devices that have very limited processing capabilities and very little RAM. And there exist already a lot of benchmarking results that have been collected in the course of the NIST post-quantum project. And when you look at these benchmarking results, there are good news and bad news. So the good news is that there are many lattice-based CAMs that are faster than, for example, Curve 25519, when we use Curve 25519 as a typical example for a pre-quantum crypto system. But there are also bad news, and the bad news is that, at least according to the current benchmarking results, most of the lattice-based crypto systems, or in general, most post-quantum crypto systems, have very high RAM requirements. So typically in the area of 5 to 20 kilobytes, which is at least an order of magnitude more than Curve 25519, which can be implemented to have a RAM consumption of only 500 bytes. And this, of course, raises the question of how well can post-quantum crypto systems be optimized for low RAM footprint, and how fast are such RAM-optimized post-quantum crypto systems on small microcontrollers. And we tried to make a first step towards answering this question, and we focus on 3 pairs. 3 pairs was a second round candidate in the NIST project. It did unfortunately not go into the 3rd round. Its security is based on a special variant of the learning with error problem, the so-called integer module learning with errors problem. And the specification contains 3 instances, baby bear, mama bear, baba bear, which correspond to NIST security categories 2, 4, and 5, respectively. And there exist CCA and CPA secure variants. Good. I think I will not have much time to talk about the algorithm itself. In principle, encapsulation and decapsulation is somewhat similar to Kyber. I suppose Kyber is probably more well known because it made it into the 3rd round. So from an implementation point of view, we have 3 essential building blocks. These are the ring arithmetic, the sampler, which is basically Shake 256, which means catch. And we have BCA code for error correction. What I would say the most interesting feature of 3 pairs is the underlying ring. the elements of this ring can be represented as integers modulo this prime here. So 2 to the power of 3120 minus 2 to the power of 1560 minus 1. This is a so-called Salinas prime that allows very efficient model reduction. And since the elements are integers, the arithmetic is simple integer arithmetic, so multiplication and addition of 3120-bit integers. And this ring structure and the elements, the fact that these are integers has some advantages over normal polynomial rings. One advantage is that integer arithmetic allows trade-offs between speed and code size. Whereas in normal polynomial arithmetic, when you want to speed up polynomial arithmetic, you normally use Karatsuba or Thun-Cook. So these are algorithms that normally increase the memory consumption. Whereas for normal integer arithmetic, you also have techniques that allow you to speed up the execution time at the expense of some increase in code size. Second advantage is that we saw some interesting options for DPA countermeasures. And third advantage is that we thought this 3-pass is highly suitable for hybrid cipher suits where you need pre- and post-quantum crypto systems. And when you use, for example, a pre-quantum crypto system curve 25519, then the low-level arithmetic is integer arithmetic. And also in 3-pairs, we have integer arithmetic. So there would be the option to share some low-level software libraries for integer arithmetic, or to share, in the case of hardware implementation, to share integer multiplier, for example. Which is in theory, of course, also possible with polynomial rings, but it's, I think, much more complicated. So the main, from an arithmetic point of view, the main operation of 3-pairs is a multiply accumulate operation where you basically multiply two large integers together and do a modulo reduction, modulo this special prime that we have seen in the last slide. There is also here a factor of 2 to the minus 1560, which is due to reduce the distortion of the noise, but it's not a big issue in the implementation. The modulo reduction is very fast. Our implementation, we use a radix 2 to the power of 32 representation of the integers, which means that so basically from a high level point of view, the multiplication uses this so-called hybrid method, which is a combination of operand scanning and product scanning, which means the algorithm has a nested loop structure. In the inner loop, we always process 4 bytes of one operand and 4 bytes of the other operand, multiply them together to get a 64-bit partial product, and this 64-bit partial product is added to an accumulator. We actually use a special variant of this so-called hybrid method that is called reverse product scanning, and is, as far as I know, still the fastest variant of this hybrid method. The hybrid method itself is quite old, so it was introduced in just 2004 and is widely used for all kinds of RSA and ECC implementations. In the paper, we have 2 implementations. So we describe a high-speed variant, which is optimized for speed. It uses 3 levels of Karatsuba and RBS multiplication underneath. And we have also developed a memory-efficient version that uses only 1 level of Karatsuba. This basically you always need to use to enable fast reduction, and also we combine this again with our special hybrid method, this so-called reverse product scanning method. Good, let's have a look at some of the results. So we have here 2 tables. The upper one is the execution time. And we have always 4 different variants. So there is ME. ME stands for memory efficient. And we have HS variants, which is the high-speed variant. And we have, for each variant, we have a CCA secure and a CPA secure version. And when we now look on the first table at the MAC operation, we see that the The execution time of the high-speed variant for this Mac operation is 600,000 clock cycles, which is a lot faster than the memory-efficient version, which needs more than 1 million cycles. When we now look down at the second table where there is the RAM footprint, we can see that the memory-efficient version has a very low RAM footprint, whereby RAM here means the stack consumption used inside the function. So it does not include the RAM that the operand themselves need. On the other hand, the high-speed variant uses more RAM because it has more levels of Karatsuba. It's around 900 kilobytes. So when we then again look at, for example, go back to the execution time for encapsulation and decapsulation, we see that the high-speed variants have an encapsulation time of around 8 million cycles, whereas the memory-efficient variants are slower. They need 12 million cycles. And when you look at the decapsulation time, what is apparent here is that the CPA secure versions are much faster than the CCA secure versions, because the CCA secure versions do a re-encapsulation of the plain text. In terms of RAM consumption, you see on the lower table on the right side the overall RAM consumption, which is the maximum of encapsulation, decapsulation, and key generation. And as you see, the memory efficient ephemeral, so the version is relatively modest. It needs about 1.8 or 1.7 kilobytes of RAM, which is, as far as we know, the lowest RAM footprint ever reported in the literature. Whereas the high-speed versions need more RAM again because of more levels of Karatsuba. In terms of code size, all versions need around or between 11 and 12 kilobytes of code size. So which includes everything: encapsulation, decapsulation, and key generation. So let's still have a quick look at some other second round candidates. The only second round candidate for 8-bit AVR we are aware of is Andrew Prime, which was also developed by us and published in a paper last year. When compared to Andrew Prime, we see that the encapsulation compared to the high-speed version is quite similar. Compared to the memory-efficient version, Andrew Prime is a little bit faster. And what I think is also interesting is the comparison with Curve 25519. As I mentioned before, the RAM footprint of Curve 25519 is only around 500 bytes. But in terms of execution time, I think at least the memory efficient CPA secure version has some advantages, because the encapsulation is a little bit faster, but the decapsulation is quite a lot faster than variable-based scalar multiplication on Curve 25519. So in summary, 3PS, as we have seen, offers many trade-offs between execution time, RAM footprint, and security. Even though we did our best to optimize the RAM footprint, we have reached 1.7 kilobytes, which is still at least a factor of 3 above Curve 25519. But on the other hand, in terms of execution times, the CPA secure Baby Bear has some advantages. And yeah, all the details are in the paper and also in the long presentation on YouTube. So thank you very much.
So yeah, thanks a lot. Now I have to see if there are questions. Does anybody in the WebEx audience have a question? This doesn't seem to be the case currently.
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I also didn't see any questions popping up in Mattermost. My question is, so you said that for big integer multiplication, you can have all these trade-offs between code size and speed, whereas for polynomial multiplication, that wouldn't be the case. But really, the only difference is that you omit carries.
Well,
polynomial.
wait. I did not say that it is. I think I did not say that such trade-offs are not possible for polynomials. I said the usual way of accelerating polynomial arithmetic is using Karatsuba, Thun-Cook, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I misunderstood. Okay.
But I think it's interesting. Basically, you notice these hybrid techniques. In principle, they would also work, of course, for polynomials, but the speed up that you get there is much less impressive than what you get for integers. And at least we have tried also different kinds of hybrid techniques for N2 prime. And there, I mean, the explanation is not so easy to describe in a few sentences. But what we saw as a problem with N2 prime is that your coefficients, the coefficients are 12 bits, 11 bits, or something like this. So you always waste register space, and that is a problem because especially on these AVR microcontrollers, you try to take advantage of the register space as much as possible to minimize the number of loads and stores. And this is one of the problems that we encountered with N2 prime, for example, that you always waste half of a register all the time. And so again, you can also, of course, apply the hybrid method for polynomial multiplication, but the speed up that you get is much less than what you get for this integer multiplication.
No, that makes sense. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So I stop now sharing my screen. Okay.
Okay. So are there further questions from the audience? If you're watching us on YouTube and cannot join the WebEx, then of course the Mattermost chat is a good opportunity to interact and to ask questions. If we do not have further questions, then I think
I have a small question. Sorry. You said this is suitable for DPA countermeasures. Could you just like open this a little bit?
Yeah. So basically we came up with a couple of ideas in addition to masking and so on and so forth. And well, when we say efficient, we mean, or when we say it, we had some nice ideas for DPA countermeasure. You always need to understand this in relation to for example, other lattice-based crypto systems, like again N2 prime, which is very difficult to mask because of the model reduction that you need for the coefficients. And in the case of 3 pairs, in addition to ordinary masking, so we also had some ideas for some low-level countermeasures. So again, when you think now that when you think of this hybrid method again, where you have this nested loop, and in the inner loop you do this multiply accumulate operation. So where you always multiply 2 32-bit operands together, you get a 64-bit product and add this to a sum that is in a 72-bit accumulator. What you can do there, for example, to thwart DPA attacks is at the beginning, you initialize this accumulator with some random value. You perform your inner loop, which means you add up your products, your 64-bit products, and then when you are finished with one column, you subtract again the random number. And this is again, since we are talking here about 64-bit products, you can add a 64-bit integer and a random integer, subtract it then again at the end. This again is also something you can do for polynomials, but in the case again, when we think of N2 prime, the polynomials, the coefficients are 12 bits. which means you can effectively only add a 12-bit random integer, whereas in our case, we could add a 64-bit random integer and then subtract it again at the end. And there would have been a couple of these low-level countermeasures, but I'm afraid that they are now all a little bit obsolete because 3 pairs did not advance into the third round. So I'm not sure if there is any interest to further research or to further research in this direction. But again, I mean, I also mentioned that in one of my slides 3 advantages, and none of these 3 advantages by itself is really a killer advantage. But the combination of these 3 advantages, I think, is something that would have been nice to have in the third round, and it did not happen. So,
thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks a lot. As we might run a bit out of time, I think we would move to the next speaker. Unfortunately, the first speaker is not yet able to join, but Johannes is already in the call and ready to give the third presentation. And if we have time in the end, of course, there's also the opportunity to ask all speakers of the session further questions. So yeah, Johannes, just to check, I'm making you a presenter now. You should now be able to share your screen.
Yes. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Johannes. I'm going to quickly do the pitch for my paper, Classic Mechanism Implementation with Low Memory Footprint. So when you talk about classic mechanisms and embedded devices, usually it ends when you look at the public key size, because it's just too big. So for the shown parameter sets, it's around 1/4 megabyte to over a megabyte. For our work, we use the shown Nucleo board. So it has 256 kilobyte of RAM. And what we wanted to do in our work was to address the handling of the public key. So we did not try to invent a different crypto system, but instead address the handling of the public key. So the goal was to never hold a full public key in memory at a time. So our solution that we saw was that we can stream the public key. So what do we mean by streaming? Basically that we only ever process a small chunk of the public key at a time and not the full public key in a large buffer. And when we have processed this part, that we then can remove it from memory again. So this can be seen in 2 directions. So for example, for a TLS connection, when you have a device that holds the private key, you still have to transmit the public key to the other party. And you do not want to have the public key in a huge memory buffer, but you also want to compute small chunks of the public key and send it to the other party in order to not overload the memory. And the same goes for the other direction. So when you do the encapsulation operation, you do not want to buffer the full public key, but instead what you would want to do is to only process the bytes that you just received and then compute the partial encapsulation and repeat until you have received all bytes. So now I kind of have to skip to the results. So for the key generation, for the reference implementation, the memory requirements are dominated by the matrix H head, which is a bit bigger than the public key itself. Instead, in our implementation, we have a smaller matrix, which only has n-k columns instead of n columns. So in the table, we can see the difference. This is now only comparing the size of those matrices but this is the largest part of the memory that is required. So for example, for the smallest parameter set, we have around 335,000 bytes for the reference implementation, and we can do with around 74,000 bytes. So that this fits in our device, the shown nuclear board at the beginning. And the idea now is that we can use this matrix S and compute small chunks of the public key from this matrix instead of computing a huge buffer where we have the public key in it. So this is what we use for streaming, and we add the matrix S to our private key. And we can omit the public key instead. So, and then the other direction was the encapsulation. So the encapsulation operation basically consists of the syndrome computation. The public key is used for computing the syndrome of an error vector E. And this is done by multiplying H by E. And H is basically a matrix that contains the public key. And the goal now is that we do not have to store the complete public key in a buffer and then do the computation, but do the computations as we receive the bytes of the public key. And this is actually easy to accomplish because this is just a matrix vector multiplication. And this means many independent terms that we can compute independently, and we can update our intermediate result of the syndrome. This has already been done for the original McAlee scheme, so it's not entirely new, this idea, but we think it's often overlooked that this can be done. And it's a very simple optimization, but very effective, and can enable embedded devices to use classic McAlees where it otherwise could not. So I think I'm out of time, so I just stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the pitch. And yeah, do we have questions so far?
No questions from the chat, as far as I can tell.
So are there questions in the WebEx audience? If so, just unmute and yeah, speak up.
So then maybe I ask a question. So quite often McAleese is criticized for the large public keys, obviously, and you sometimes see the statement that that basically doesn't make it practical in several scenarios. Now the question would be, with this paper, would you say that that's just solved and we can just build the whole world out of classic McAleese?
Well, I think there's still a problem that you have to transmit the public key, so the bandwidth has to be large enough, and also the private. So for the private key holder, the problem is not completely solved. So as I showed, there is still quite a large matrix, but much smaller than the public key itself. So it helps, but it does not solve all problems. And for the encapsulation operation, I think it works really well, but only for contexts where you have an online connection, so you the public key gets streamed to you somehow.
Okay, thank you. Double check again if there's anything. There's no more questions.
So I would have a question. So have you looked into techniques to secure the streaming in some way? So encrypt the key, make sure that it doesn't get altered, or is this assuming a model where basically the outside party is honest?
Well, I don't think it's always necessary. For example, for TLS, you would also have a signature over the hash of the messages. So you cannot simply exchange the public key.
Okay. Yeah.
But then you basically need to keep the basically keep updating that hash as the public key streams in, right? On the...
Yes, but that's not really a problem, I think.
No, it's no. When you need to have the hash state sitting around, basically. Let me actually check if our last speaker is in principle there. Also, by the way, to everyone, please keep asking questions about all the talks from the session. If we have some moments at the end, then we can also bring up more questions. I'm afraid that our last speaker is still struggling with WebEx.
He was not able to join so far.
Okay.
But well, one idea would be to just have the presentation in GatherTown, so we could try that. I think that we still have 15 minutes, am I correct?
Yes. Oh, 17, 16, 17, yeah.
Okay, so what we could try is to have the presentation in GatherTown, but I'm not sure. Then everyone needs to mute. Everyone in here would need to mute, but I think that's already the case. And just meet in a room in GatherTown. I'm not sure, Tore, maybe you can say something to this.
So as one recommendation, then we would have, please don't leave this room once you're in, because Cisco still hasn't solved the issue, right? So I think it's fine, but then basically, like Florian said, we could just mute everybody here and try it in GatherTown, if you want to try that. Does everybody know how to get there?
I cannot get into GatherTown. So then I totally rely on Thomas, but I'll keep reading questions and have a separate channel with Thomas to let him know.
Yeah, I think we can try that. Of course, we are experimenting with all these virtual conferences, and this is part of the experience. But I think it makes sense first to close questions to the other two speakers before we move into a different room and maybe also lose some people on the way. So if there are any final questions that just popped up for the previous two speakers, then this would now be the right time to ask.
Nothing in MetaMost and nothing in the chat here. But
okay, then I would say let's thank the speakers again, and then do the adventure and try to meet in GatherTown. See you later in here. Bye.
Yeah, I think Adrian is also ready to present there, so we just need to switch.
Yeah, he just wrote that in MetaMost.
I see him in MetaMost. I'll switch over now as well.
S-entropy 761, and this is all done on a Xilinx Sync FPGA. We can see that key generation at the maximum frequency of 269 megahertz takes about 4.8 milliseconds. Encapsulation takes 528 microseconds, and decapsulation is at 965 microseconds, with 1,596 slices, together with 13 VRAMs and 19 DSP units. So for one, for streamlined and true prime, you have to do 2 polynomial inversions in the 2 rings you can see here. In this case, Q is, for example, 4,591 and P is 761. And this is complicated because, polynomial inversion is slow. So in this case, I used the extended GCD algorithm, which was presented at last CHESS by Bernstein and Yang. And this is faster than traditional methods of inversion, such as Fermat's little theorem, but it's still slow. It's like the reason why it takes 1 million cycles is purely because of this inversion, and it is like the main bottleneck during key generation. A second is thinking about multiplication. So a lot of other lattice schemes use the number theoretic transform, which is an integer version of the fast Fourier transform. And using this in entropy prime is difficult. It's not impossible, but it is significantly more complicated than in schemes such as Kyber. So instead, I used a mixture of simple Karatsuba and schoolbook multiplication. And this is actually a very useful slide, because something which we saw at the last presentation, that the coefficients are only 13 bits. In fact, for the second polynomial, the coefficient is only 2 bits. So what you're actually multiplying is 13-bit by 2 bits. And this is basically nothing. So it's a handful of lookup tables, and this allows it to be much smaller. Think about the constant time. So everything is in constant time. Two particularly interesting thing is about during key generation and encapsulation, we have to generate a polynomial with exactly W non-zero coefficients. And instead of doing something like sampling, there's actually I use a sorting network to basically generate this in constant time, so to not have anything like rejection sampling. And of course, the 2 other parts which are potentially vulnerable is, of course, during the decapsulation. So for one, you have to check that a polynomial has exactly W non-zero coefficients. And of course, during the ciphertext equivalence check from the Fujisaki-Okamoto transformation, that is also a highly dangerous part where you have to be constant time. Nice thing about entropy prime is that there are no decryption failures, so you can't have side channel attacks to that. But that being said, this thing does not have any more advanced protection, such as masking or anything like against differential power analysis and the likes. Finally, one final thing about the hashing. So internally, the SHA-512 is used, and the actual time spent hashing is actually not that bad. A lot of this can be done in parallel with other operations. So together with that, it takes 325 cycles in my case to actually hash a block. And because it's always done in parallel, you almost never have to actually wait for the hashing. But SHA-512 is one of the largest modules in the entire design. It used to be the largest. There's been some optimization since the paper was submitted, but it is still big. And so one takeaway of this is, if you actually want to minimize this, you have to find the appropriately sized SHA-512 implementation. Because if it's too big, then you won't get a speed benefit, but it will just use a whole bunch of resources unnecessarily. And of course, if your crypto coprocessor or whatever you're implementing already has SHA-512, then you've won, because you will save a quarter to a third of all the lookup tables and flip-flops, which of course is nice. And with that, thank you very much for the teaser. Hopefully you all heard me and the quality was okay, because I can't hear you actually. So any questions?
Okay, so the So Adrian just finished the talk in GatherTown. So far, there were no questions in the chat, and yeah, if something pops up, of course, you can contact him directly or write it now into the chat. But I think if there are no further questions, then we can conclude the first session. Thank you on whatever channel you may or may not be hearing me. May it be WebEx or GatherTown or whatever has now gotten hold of my camera and audio. But yeah, thanks a lot and see you.
Thomas, we hear you on WebEx for sure.
Okay, good.
Probably see you in GatherTown. Bye also from me, and enjoy the next sessions.
Okay, welcome back everyone, and welcome to the second session of CARDIS 2020. We will have 3 talks here that will be given by Stefan, Ane, and Malituba. I'm Francesco Regazzoni, and I'm co-chair the session with Farina Sakib. Farina, do you want
to
welcome everybody?
Yes, hi, welcome everyone. So welcome to this session. We will have 3 papers in the session. I am Farina Sakib. I am a session chair with Francisco. I'm an assistant professor in University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So we all welcome you to CARDIS 2020.
The first talk of the session is given by Stefan Stenger. Stefan is a PhD student at the University of Graz, and among his interests there is security architectures and RISC-V security. His talk is a fast and compact RISC-V architecture for Ascon and friends. Stefan?
Thank you for the introduction, and hello and welcome to my short presentation of our paper, A Fast and Compact RISC-V Accelerator for Ascon and Friends, by my colleague Robert Priemers and myself, Stefan Steinecker. So the motivation for this paper was to reduce the area overhead compared to a dedicated coprocessor. And we wanted to do this for a building block that can be used for a wide variety of encryption cryptographic algorithms. So it should be usable for authenticated encryption, hashing, pseudo-random number generation. And this versatile building block we decided on was ASCON-P, which is used by both Ascon and ISAP. And another advantage is that if our accelerator is used with the ISAP mode, we get authenticated encryption with hardening against implementation attacks, and that both regarding both power analysis and fallout attacks. So we don't have a need for a dedicated protected hardware building block. So about building the accelerator, coprocessors typically implement the mode and also the primitives or the building blocks they use in hardware. And we chose a different approach here, as we wanted to reuse parts of the register file of a CPU and implement only the combinatorial logic of this ASCON-P permutation function. And if you look at it for constrained CPU architectures like ARM-v7 or the RISC-V RV32E ISA, you only have 16 registers there. But the ASCON-P state it operates on only has 320-bit states, and that correlates to either 10 32-bit registers or only 5 64-bit registers. So in both cases, the complete state of ASCON-P fits in CPU registers, and we can save quite a lot of chip area there. It also allows us to integrate it as a easily integrate it as a custom instruction, and the mode remains entirely in software with this approach. So what we did is we added the ASCON-P permutation to the RISC-V, or now it's called the CV32E40P core, and we performed a few modifications to the register file and the decode stage. So for the instruction encoding itself, we selected an I-type instruction, and that means that we have a 12-bit immediate, and there we can encode the round constant that is used for the permutation, but we can also pass the number of rounds we want to do using this instruction, and optionally the endianness of how the data is represented in the register. So about the register file adaptations, for ASCOMP operates on lanes of 64 bits. And since we have a 32-bit CPU, the lanes are split into 2 registers for each of these lanes, and that leaves us with 10 32-bit registers. And since smaller constrained chips usually don't have that many read and write ports, but we also don't need the dynamic selection of specific registers, we defined a subset of the CPU registers to double as ASCOMP registers. And then with the instruction, we can toggle between the read and write port of the accelerator, can toggle between the read and write port and the accelerator output. So about the performance of our approach, we evaluated it with ASCON and ISAP implementations. And for ASCON hash, and ISAP with the accelerator, we could achieve a speed up of about 40 to 80-fold, depending on the length of the message. And we also achieved a smaller binary size because we don't have to implement the ASCON round permutation function in software. And for the on the hardware side of things, the area got quite a bit smaller compared to dedicated coprocessors. So our approach is only 40 to 60% of published ASCON coprocessors and only about 35% of an estimated ISAP coprocessor. So as a final remark, what you can find in our paper is we show that ASCOMP presents a versatile building block for a wide variety of applications, and we also show how we implemented the accelerator and how to use it. And you can find detailed information on the impact of the performance for ASCON hash, and ISAP. We also have a detailed description of the area consumption when the accelerator is present in a RISC-V CPU, and we also discussed the effect on the ISAP implementation security, as well as a discussion on simple power analysis attacks on ISAP with and without the accelerator. So that brings me to the end of this short summary. I thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
Do we have a question from the audience?
Hi, Olivier Bronchin here from UC Louvain. I just have a short question. So you mentioned that you were able, with your architecture, you were able to go 80 times faster than a pure software implementation. Does it mean that one round of the permutation is 80 times slower in software? Or, I mean, I would have expected a larger overhead. And does it come from the fact that the mode takes a lot of time too?
No, the speed increase is we compared encrypting a fixed amount of data with the pure software implementation and the pure hardware implementation. So you still have to do the loads and stores from the to the registers for the message, and that also takes some time. So that's the overall speed comparison. The hardware, the loop itself that processes the message. Here I can show that. So the part that only encrypts the data looks like this. So you have just your load and stores with the XORs, and then the stores for the ciphertext, and then you call the permutation function 6 times, depending on where you are in the data processing. And this part, so you still have some overhead for the mode in software. But you only have, this permutation function only takes 1 cycle. I hope that answers your question.
And just like, yeah, and one round in pure software, how many cycles, more or less?
That's a good question. We didn't evaluate that specifically. We only took a look at the whole encryption process.
Okay, thanks.
And then we calculate the cycles per byte, but not only. But we didn't just look at the permutation function itself.
Okay, thanks. That might be interesting to look at some point. But thank you very much. Nice work.
Thank you.
There are 2 questions in the chat, and then I think Rosario was raising the hand. I would let first Rosario ask the question, then I read the one in the chat.
No, sorry. It's just my error on raising my hand.
Okay. Then I'll read the first question from the chat. What is the impact on the critical path and frequency of the core?
Critical path and frequency of the core. So with our approach, we tried it with different amounts of hardware rounds of the ASCII permutation, and we couldn't observe any difference in the overall critical path. So it didn't stand out for at least 6 rounds done in hardware.
Okay.
It's quite a slim design.
Second question. As far as I know, ASCII shares a lot with SHA-3. How much can be reused?
I actually didn't look into that in detail. I think the permutation function is similar, but I think it isn't parameterized the same. So you probably would require different. You could reuse the design, but you would probably need to redo the parameterization. But I'm not sure about that totally, so that's just a wild guess there. And also, I think SHA-3 is a pretty much a lot bigger state than ASCII, so you might run into troubles there.
Do you have any other question for Stefan? If not, we can move to the next presentation. Then we will have other questions on all the papers at the end of the session.
Thank you very much. I will unshare my screen now.
Thanks, Stefan. And can you give the right to Arne for sharing the presentation?
Hi, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. The next talk is Optimized Software Implementation for the Lightweight Encryption Scheme Fork AE, and will be given by Arne Depretz. He's a graduated Master of Electrical Engineering from KU Leuven University, and he's presenting his work that is part of his master thesis. Currently, Arne works as a research and develop engineer on embedded software and custom-made controllers. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll do. Oh, don't switch slides. Oh, there it is. As said, my paper is about ForkAE, which is an authenticated encryption scheme based on the fork skinny primitive, which I will explain a bit more about in the next slide. ForkAE is currently a second round candidate in the NIST lightweight crypto competition. This competition is searching for new primitive or protocols for specifically for constrained devices, as you can find in the Internet of Things or smart cards, automotive, etc. And what we did is research the possibilities for designing optimized software for ForkAE. We made several implementations, some that are meant to be portable, but also implementations that target platforms with specific properties. 4KE, as I said, is based on a new type of primitive, a fork cipher. The fork cipher used here is fork skinny, which is based on the skinny cipher. And a fork cipher is able to produce two independent permutations, but at a reduced computational cost, because the first number of rounds are in common for both outputs. This way, 4KE tries to optimize the encryption of small to very small messages. First, I'll talk a bit about the portable implementations we made. A large part of this work is based on the implementations by Weatherly, who made portable implementations, 32-bit implementations for almost all the second round candidates of the lightweight crypto competition. Based on his implementation, we came up with an implementation that tries to close the gap between encryption and decryption by pre-processing the key schedule and storing the results, so that there is no need for forwarding the schedule and then reverting it every time. This way we achieve a speed of up to 38%. Also, the code size is reduced, and the maximum amount of extra RAM that is needed is just below 700 bytes. As you can see from results from a benchmarking initiative and the figures on the right, we successfully closed a large part of the gap between encryption and decryption. We also made, as I said, some implementations for specific platforms. A first type of platform is a platform where cache timing attacks are not possible. There, lookup tables can be used to speed up the calculations. We came up with a way of defining the round function as a combination of 4 lookups and some extra tables for addition of the key and the distance. This way, one round of Skinny can be calculated with 18 lookups and 19 XOR operations. The tables are a kilobyte each. This can be a bit much, but because the tables are very similar, there is an alternative to use only one table, which introduces only a little bit of overhead. With this implementation, we achieved a speed up of 20% for encryption. In order to do the same for decryption, we had to reorder some operations and define a new inverse round and then a separate first and final round. And this new inverse rounds can even be more efficiently translated into table lookups. And for decryption, this way we achieve 25% speed up. We also made implementations for parallel hardware. The target we chose as an example is the ARM Neon SIMD. The processor we had 128-bit SIMD. And in this implementation, we try to exploit the data level parallelism that is available in fork Skinny. A first place where there is a lot of data level parallelism is within the round function, the Skinny round function, because the substitution, the S box is calculated for all the cells of the internal state. So for the 128-bit variance, that's 128 bits in parallel. And by using the Neon SIMD, we can achieve a speed up of 30%. Compared to the portable implementations that do not use Neon. But fork Skinny also has another interesting level of data level parallelism, and that is the parallelism of the fork. Because you have these two branches in parallel, the S-box can be calculated for two internal states in parallel. we showed this for the 64-bit instance of 4KE because this way two internal states fit in one neon register. Of course, if you have a neon or other SIMD hardware that has 256-bit registers, you could do this also for the 128-bit instances. We achieve a speed up of 29%. Now this seems less than not using the parallelism of the fork, but that is actually not the case. The SBox used in the 64-bit instance is a lot simpler than in the 128-bit instance. But yeah, here we really exploit the parallelism of the fork. And this is also what you can see in this figure. So by just using Neon to accelerate the SBox calculations, for Skinny takes about 1.6 times as much time as just calculating one branch, as it is done in a normal cipher, in a normal use of this this round function as in Skinny AAD. But when you calculate the two branches after the forking point in parallel, the amount of calculations is only 1.10 times. The calculation time is only 1.10 times as much. And this way, you are faster for message for up to 10 message blocks. That is because of this double output, 4KE only needs one call, needs M calls to the primitive per M message blocks, whereas in traditional modes of operation, you always need an extra call for processing the nonce or generating the tag. And this way, we show that if you can calculate the SBox for in parallel for the two branches, that you are faster up to 10 message blocks. Some takeaways of the work that we did in our paper are that it's not right to say one implementation fits all. If you have a platform with specific properties, there are always ways to exploit these and make a better implementation. And also that there is always, of course, the trade-off, use a bit more RAM or ROM or gain in speed. But to be able to make this trade-off and to have different implementations, of course, you need a versatile cipher. And I think we show that 4KE is such a versatile cipher that has many different options, many different ways to implement it. That was my presentation. Thank you. And I'm glad to hear your questions.
Do we have questions for Arne? Any question from the chat? Okay,
So,
do we have, yeah? Please, Farina, go on.
yes, so I don't have questions on the other platform, but we will have some time after the talk, so maybe we can continue with the third talk.
Yeah, I do have just one quick question before. When you say need a versatile cipher, can you make a couple of examples of what you mean exactly? Can you enter a bit more in details on this?
Yeah, what I really mean by this is 4KE proves or shows that different implementation strategies are possible. Not for every cipher you will have the possibility to make such varying implementations. Of course, there are many ciphers that do have this, but I think in research for lightweight lightweight implementations and lightweight ciphers, it will be important that that you can really shape the implementation to the platform you have in order to get the most out of it.
Okay, I have a second question. You were discussing all the trade-offs related to the specific platform and the specific architecture you have. I know it's a bit outside the work you did, but the experience you have gained maybe can give some insight. In the previous presentation, we've seen some modification of an architecture. Based on your design, on the cipher you were analyzing, which one would be the feature that you would love to have but you do not have in the architecture you were using to make it even better?
That's a good question. Of course, if you have an accelerator to calculate the most expensive part of your cipher, that is always nice to have. If for instance, there was a one cycle accelerator to calculate the substitution, or maybe even an entire round, that would largely speed up the calculations.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other question. Then we can move to the next presentation, and then we go back to all the paper at the end of the session. So let's thank Arne again.
Thank you.
And we should give to Matluba the right of administration to share the screen. So the next talk is secure and efficient delegation of pairings with online inputs, and will be given by Matluba. Matluba is an assistant professor at the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at CUNY. And her research interests are in the area of cryptography, and mainly on the area of secure outsourcing of computation in the cloud. So the floor is yours. We cannot hear you. You're probably still muted.
I cannot see her in the participant list. Is she?
Hello, everybody.
Oh,
How are you doing? Could you hear me now? Oh,
yes,
hi.
now we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the introduction. I would like to introduce our paper, Secure and Efficient Delegation of Pairing with Online Inputs. This is the joint paper with Giovanni Di Crescenzo, Delaram Kahrobai, and Vladimir Shpirlin. Now, let's consider the computationally limited device like smart cards. Now, the goal is implementing public key system in computationally weaker devices is the challenging problem, because most public key crypto system algorithm requires expensive computation, like the pairing or the exponentiation and so on. In this paper, we propose protocols for computationally weaker devices to delegate securely, efficiently, and privately computationally expensive function like pairing to a single server, possibly malicious server. Now let's get started. We have two parties, client and server. Client is computationally weaker device, which is need help from the computationally more powerful server. And client would like to evaluate the function f of x with the help of server. And while delegation between client and server, the four requirements should satisfy correctness, input privacy, output security, and efficiency. When I talk about efficiency, our goal is to make sure that client's runtime, online runtime, has to be much smaller than computation of f of x without delegation of computation. So we would like to, for example, evaluate the peering. We have to make sure that client's online runtime should be much less than evaluating that function. Why? Because client is a computationally weaker device. So now we in this paper we consider regarding the bilinear pairing. This is the map between G1 across G2, where G1 and G2 are additive cyclic group of order L, and G2 be the multiplicative cyclic group of order L, which satisfies bilinearity, non-triviality. So this bilinear map is widely used in many cryptographic protocols, especially based on discrete logarithm problem. More capabilities is on this. This function is in identity-based encryption and so on. And our paper is analyzed on the 4 more practical curves, BN12 and so on. This table will show you that comparison of, for example, exponentiation in GT is more expensive than scalar multiplication in G1 and G2. And the pairing, that's what we are looking for. Yes, the pairing are almost 1 order of magnitude more expensive than exponentiation in GT. So now previous results, there were the previous results were trying to delegate the delegation of the pairings, but their result either was the privacy holds, but security didn't hold, or the efficiency was not as good as non-delegation computation. Our previous results also recently we published that one, but specifically for the BN elliptic curve, it didn't reach then non-delegated computation. So in this paper, we show that when both inputs are only available online phase, the bilinear map pairing can be efficiently, privately, and securely delegated to a single, possibly malicious server. We consider 2 scenarios where A and B are publicly available during online phase, and A and B are privately available during online phase. In both protocols, we mainly consider on the client's online runtime because client is computationally weaker device with respect to the 4 most studied elliptic curves. And the client's online runtime is the most expensive operation was 1 exponentiation to a short exponent, which shows that this improves over all previous protocols where the client either make a larger number of exponentiations. Our first case, when A and B are public, we would like to evaluate E of AB using this protocol, but I cannot go in detail. If you want, you can go and read our paper or the previous video. And this papers show that this satisfies correctness, security, and efficiency, and it compares the previous results, what it have been done, and we are mainly considering the client's online runtime versus non-delegation. If, of course, the number is small, that much is good, and if you see that previous results compared to ours, our result is better than the previous results. And the next case we consider when A and B are private online. In here, we proposed 4 protocols, but most efficient protocol was this one. And we prove in our paper the correctness, privacy, security. Sorry, I cannot go into too much details, but efficiency, especially this protocol is the most challenging protocol. Why? Because A and B are given online, and at the same time it has to be private, differently saying client has to hide those inputs. Yes, the previous result was if you compare the client's online runtime versus non-delegating function, it was as good as non-delegated one, or it's more than expensive than non-delegated one. This is the first result where we're showing that our protocol is better than the non-delegated one, the efficiency-wise, and it's also secure and private at the same time. Okay, in this paper, we show that the techniques for computationally weaker client efficiently, privately, and securely delegate peering to a single, possibly malicious servers in both scenarios. In both scenarios, we prove that it is efficient, and if we're going to compare the state of art, our result was better. Okay, thank you very much, and I will wait your questions.
Do we have any questions for Matluba? I see one question in the chat. I'll begin with this one. What are the assumptions made for the case scenario of A and B are both private?
When A and B are private, we have an offline calculation. Yes, we are assuming that the client is randomly choosing these two inputs and making some pre-calculation and using those pre-calculation over the online phase.
Do we have any other question? How is different, reading from the chat, how is different from public A and B?
How it is different than, excellent question, actually. Thank you for that question. If A and B are, if A and B are publicly known, then that means that I can give to the server to calculate E of AB. So you can see that the server is calculating E of AB. But when A and B are private online, I cannot just let the server know that what is A and B, and what I have to do in that case scenario, I have to hide it. Let me show you the protocol. Yes, I have to make sure that hide it, and so that no information about A and no information about B was leaking to the server. This is how it is different. Did I answer to the question?
There's another question. Where are the computations performed?
The computation is, for example, we would like to evaluate E of AB, yes, and we have a protocol, yes. For example, the protocol is identity-based encryption. In that paper, for example, it's necessary to evaluate the bilinear map pairing. But since computationally weaker device like a client it cannot do it, what it can do it can ask help for the computationally more powerful server to compute that function, that expensive function, by delegation. So, for example, let me give you example: car key communication or smart card communication. When you are swiping or something like that, if we want to implement this in public key cryptography over there, if it has to do the bilinear pairing, then it has to be quick computation. Yes, unfortunately, that device is computationally weaker device, so it needs help from somewhere else. So the server can help to evaluate that function.
Thank you. Do we have any other question for Matluba?
So continued with the discussion that you just had. So given the case scenario for the resource-constrained devices, can you decide which model fits the best, or is it the end user or the required security goals that decide whether the A and B will be private or public?
It depends to the what public key cryptography are we using. Yes, if we are using public key cryptography where A and B are public, then we're going to use that protocol. If the protocol that some protocol is using when A and B are private, then we are using that one. It depends to the what public key cryptography algorithm we are using for.
So continuing with that, is in your study, do you if you have to apply security strength for one type over the other, is it more secure to have A and B private, or it is a function, a derivative of which protocol you're using eventually?
You're saying that the two protocols, how secure they are, that's what your question, or the comparison of their security?
In terms of keeping A and B private or public for the protocol, does it influence, is it just based on the implementation of that public-private cryptography, or is it if it's more like a fundamental question of keeping the parameters private versus public? Is it more as a property of the protocol that it implements, or it has to do with more security strength when you keep the parameters private?
I see. I'm not sure that I understand your question, but what we prove in our paper regarding A and B are public, we have to make sure that this parameter C is 128 bits, is unique. And since it is unique, that means that we prove that it is secure, that the server can cheat with the probability of 2 to the power of negative 128 in both scenario, actually. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Got it.
Do we have any other question for Matluba? If not, we still have 7-8 more minutes. I would ask everybody to ask a question also to the other speakers of the session. I remember was a talk of Stefan about fast and compact RISC-V accelerator for Ascon and friends. Talk of Arne about optimized implementation for lightweight encryption scheme for KE. And now the talk of Matluba about secure and efficient delegation of pairing with online input. If there are no questions, I have a question for Stefan. You mentioned that you have done some security analysis and some analysis about resistance against simple power analysis attack, if I remember correctly. Can you enter a bit into details of this?
Yeah, sure. So ISAP itself already covers a broad range of covers already some of these attacks and prevents them with its mode. And for the simple power analysis, we looked at what are the remaining possible attack vectors, and it basically boils down to the ISAP, the state setup phase. So because the accelerator, thanks to the accelerator, simple power analysis attacks become quite hard to do because everything's because we work on 320 bits in parallel. So the only remaining option there becomes the state setup phase, and yeah, you need to protect that in some way. For instance, with shuffling or something like that.
Why do you say exactly shuffling? Is because you have a feeling that is good, or because you think that something else has too much overhead?
It's one way to counter that, and so yeah, I say it because it's one way to counter that, and one easy way, and yeah.
Okay. Along the same line, I have a question to Arne.
Yes.
Can you say something about side channel resistance? If it's easy to implement, if you think it's complicated, which one could be a suitable scheme? I understand that it's just feeling because you didn't do this work, but can you anticipate something?
As to power side channels, I don't really know what is already done for 4KE or for Skinny. I know that the portable implementations by Weatherly try to be as constant time as possible, and we also verified the constant timeness using the Dude is my code constant time tool. And this tool gives kind of an assurance that the code is indeed constant time. But as for other side channels, I did not look into that, and I don't know what the impact of implementing countermeasures would be.
But do you have any feeling about something that looks very problematic to protect, or is more or less similar to any other algorithm? Same challenges, more or less.
I think it's comparable with other block ciphers, and this way it won't be extra hard for 4KE to implement the countermeasures. Does that answer your question?
All right. Thanks. I think Francisco is mute. So I have a question from the paper, the first paper on RISC-V. Do you have a test bed where you validated the extensions and the instructions? And how does the tool chain support with your modified RISC-V? Can you please put some light on that?
So we released the code to GitHub, so you can find the hardware and the adaptations to the RISC-V EtherSIM, and also the implementations we tested, all in the repo. So for now, the instruction is only supported with you in the assembly mode. So you basically insert the instructions where you want it in assembly. As toolchain, so the toolchain, so there's no dedicated compiler support for it yet. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
All right. So is it something which you're looking up as a future work?
Yeah, possibly.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right. I will check the other platform as well. So for those who are joining from the Gather Town, you can leave your questions on the chat if you're not part of the Zoom. I do not see any new questions so far, but I think we can give a couple of minutes if we have some more questions. So Arne, I would like to, if you can discuss us with the 4K project and of it being the second round in the as a candidate. So can you share some of the? I know it's not too relevant for the paper, but we would like to know the process and how and what novel features do you have to offer in that?
So the competition is currently still in the second round. I'm not really part of the 4K team. I just made software implementations because it looked like an interesting candidate. Of course, the most recent information on how they are doing in the round is always available on their website. Yeah, I think the third round of the competition, I think a date is announced for when the selections of the third round will be made. I would have to look into that.
That's very interesting. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, recently also a paper was published with some new insights on 4KE and some new results on hardware implementations also. The paper can be found on the NIST website, but also on the 4KE website.
So do you have a Git repository or where we can look into more on the code or not yet?
Yes, all my software implementations are available on my GitHub repo. The link to the GitHub repo is in my paper, but also on the 4KE website, I think. Yeah, so there you can have a look into the code. It's not very documented yet. I plan on adding some more documentation in the future. But yeah, the code is there and everything can be found on my GitHub.
All right, great. All right, thanks. All right, so we will wait for questions from the audience. And I think Francisco is also online now.
Yeah, so let's wait 1 more minute. In the meantime, let me ask a curiosity to Stefan. Is there any reason why you selected that specific implementation of RISC-V as a starting point, or?
No, not really. I was working with I was working with another similar core before with from the Pulp platform, and so I looked into the smaller ones and started them. I used them as a starting point, and yeah.
So you are specifically looking for the SPA right now. What about the other attacks, the CPA and DPA? What are your plans or thoughts on those attacks?
So for the DPA, SFA, CIFA, and one more, DFA attacks, ISAP already provides protection on a mode level, so we don't need to look into that. And so SPA was one of the remaining that we looked into, so that is also covered.
I see.
Okay, I have a last question for Matluba. You were showing the example of the small card that is wiped for using the schema you were proposing. Do you have any other example where do you see your application being immediately suitable?
You're mute, Matluba.
The question was where our application is applicable. That is what your question is?
Yeah. Where do you see immediately benefit for using your application?
Yeah, I gave a couple examples. Identity-based encryption, given that paper, short signatures. I forgot the name of the public key encryption with keyword search, three-party key agreement, certificate-less encryption and signature, and so on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that there are no more questions, so I would like to thank all the speakers of the session and all the attendees, and I leave the final word to Farina. You're muted.
All right. Yes, thank you very much for attending the session, and all the talks were very interesting. So thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Thomas, you can. I think is Thomas here?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. Yes. So I think we are done with the question and answer session.
Yes, we can. We'll have a short break for a few minutes, let's say 3 minutes, and I think then we'll start into the next session. Florian, do you have the slide? You're around?
Yes, I will shortly show the break slide.
And the system seems to be restored, so our next speaker is in as well. Nadia, did you have any problems joining?
Nope.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Other than forgetting to click the join button because it wasn't obvious in the preview.
Awesome. Yeah. No, it took until recently. It took a few minutes to enter the channel, so yeah, we're very happy that it's working better now.
Yeah, do you get problem to join the channel, Nadia?
No, it worked out okay.
Okay. Nadia, I make you presenter now so that you can already share your screen.
Hey, no. Sorry, I have some collaborators here. And
Okay.
And okay. I've made it. Presentation, hopefully that works out okay. So now I can't see anything else.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. So I think it's time now. So welcome everybody to this this session. It's a real pleasure to welcome Nadia Henninger today for this keynote. Nadia is an associate professor in computer science and engineering at University of California, San Diego. And Nadia has a collection, not of cats, but a collection of awards, or maybe cats, but at least collection of awards. From the Best Student Paper Award she get at Unix Security in 2008, to the prestigious NFS Career Award. NFS stands for National Science Foundation. She's collecting awards thanks to her intensive research work. Her research focuses on applied cryptography and security, in particular on cryptanalysis of public key cryptography, especially in practice. This means that Nadia combines practical implementation characteristics of public key cryptosystems and cryptanalysis techniques to obtain secrets from devices. In our recent publication, Nadia gave us an overview on how to exploit weaknesses of cryptocurrency, TPM devices, TEE, Trusted Execution Environment implementation. Impressive, no? Today, Nadia will make a statement to us on partial key recovery algorithms for side channel cryptanalysis. Nadia, we are listening to you.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me to give the talk. And also thank you to everybody in Europe for staying past 5 p.m. I guess it's early for me and it's late for you. So yeah, so the plan for my talk is to sort of survey some results, old and new, in partial key recovery algorithms for side channel cryptanalysis. So the motivation here is, of course, side channel attacks. As from the attacker's point of view, when you're trying to carry out a side channel attack, you often get only partial information about the data that you have. And in the context of cryptography, it's interesting only if you can get an entire private key. And so the motivation for the work that I'm going to be talking about is, if you get partial information, what techniques can you use to recover the rest of the cryptographic key? So we're going to take the perspective of the attacker, who uses math to recover the rest of the key rather than signal processing techniques. So I'm going to survey sort of 3 families of algorithms that I've sort of run across in my own research, and that hopefully will be useful to you guys. Many of you maybe already do this if you work in this area. So the first family is the branch and prune family of algorithms. And the main application for this is the context of RSA, when non-contiguous bits of secret keys are known and you need to recover the rest. Then I'll talk a little bit about Coppersmith-Palgrave-Graham lattice methods, and the application here is RSA if you know many contiguous bits. And then I'm excited to talk about some new things about the hidden number problem, which is often used to cryptanalyze DSA and ECDSA for side channel attacks that can recover some bits of the nonce for the signature. So that's our plan. So the first family here, the branch and prune family of algorithms, this technique works the best for cases where you know multiple fields of an RSA private key, but you only have some information in the form of bits or non-contiguous blocks. but there's no large chunks where you don't know something about what's going on in the secret key. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, here's my sort of textbook RSA description. So our public key is N and E, the modulus N and the encryption exponent E. We're generally going to assume that E is 65537 because that's what everybody uses, but it could be smaller. It is almost never larger. And we're just going to assume that the attacker knows N and E. And the secret key is, well, the prime factorization of N reveals the secret key. There's a decryption exponent D, which is formally the secret key, but we'll see that there's a lot more fields. And so encryption works as you guys know, and decryption works as you know. The assumption here is that the attacker is going to be observing, say, a private key operation like decryption or signing. So they're going to be observing operations that involve the secret key D or values derived from it. So in implementations, you often have access to much more information than just the textbook RSA description would imply. So the private key, I just put in the PKCS standard here because it's a common thing. This is what I've run into a few times. The private key includes the decryption exponent D, the prime factors P and Q, D mod P minus 1 and D mod Q minus 1, which are used for the Chinese remainder theorem speeding up decryption, and Q inverse mod P, which is also used for the Chinese remainder theorem. And so our attacker may get partial information about multiple of these fields, and many of these are redundant. So our simplified model for RSA key recovery, I'll start with the simplest possible model, which came out of the cold boot attacks, which was my first kind of publication in security. Which is that if you have access to an RSA private key, but some fraction of the bits have been removed. Formally, we can say we can remove all but some delta fraction of the bits chosen at random from this key. And you could model this by, say, flipping a coin to each bit of the key, and the attacker gets to see the bits value with probability delta. There were a lot of things on the previous slide. So the simplest possible case that you can think of is we know that a public modulus N, and you get random bits of P and Q. The attacker knows the public modulus N, and they want to efficiently reconstruct the key. So here's the sort of pictorial picture of this. I have a bunch of pictures of this form just to sort of illustrate like what is possible and what is not. So the colored bits are the parts that are known to the attacker, and say the white bits are the bits that are unknown to the attacker. So we have sort of random bits of P and Q, and the attacker knows all of N, and they need to recover P and Q, and this is expected polynomial time if you have more than 50% of the bits known. The approach that we're going to take to solve this problem is sort of the most naive possible approach, which is basically to write a set of binary equations over the bits of P and Q and solve them. And I'm putting in this quote here because this paper from 2009 with Hovov Chacon solving this problem, that was my first crypto publication. And when we were writing it up to submit to crypto, I searched Google for like, how do you write a crypto paper? And I found this guide for how to write crypto papers, which had 10 reasons why a paper is rejected from a crypto conference. And it described exactly what we were doing in this problem. And now I have a cat. So the algorithm itself is essentially, as I said, you start at the least significant bits and you enumerate sort of the unknown bits of P and Q. You have bits that you know and bits that you don't know. Every time you don't know a bit, you sort of branch in this tree. And you can think of this as working, you have a solution up to like mod 2 to the I, if you have I bits that you've guessed. And at each step, you can verify the piece of information that you know, which is that P times Q should equal N mod 2 to the I. And then you can also verify that the bits match the known information that you have on the key. And if either of these conditions fails, you prune. So this is very simple. And the reason that this works, you might think that, oh, our tree is going to just grow exponentially in the number of bits that we don't know. But in fact, if you guess wrong at a certain point, heuristically, this has never actually been proven. So I should have put this as an open problem to prove this. Essentially, after an incorrect guess, the induced bits for future solutions appear to be uniformly random. And with that heuristic assumption, you can actually prove that if the average amount of information that you know is basically half a bit per bit, and we have two pieces of information, and we have two factors, P and Q, then this branch and prune algorithm runs in expected linear time. So that's fun. These results are a little bit old. I want to talk about a little bit more recent applications of this. So first, for most side channel attacks, it's rare that you would get bits of P and Q. The original context of me doing this work was the cold boot attack, where we were, freezing RAM and pulling chips out, and we were getting, the DRAM was decaying at random locations, and so we had the whole PKCS data structure for a secret key, and we just needed to recover the full secret key from a partially decayed PKCS #1 data structure. But for most of the side channel attacks that appear in the literature, that's not what you get. What you get is you're observing, say, a leaky implementation of modular exponentiation during decryption or signing, and you want to recover information from that. So the case that Hovav and I actually missed in our 2009 paper that everybody really cares about is recovering the secret key from partial information on d mod p-1 and d mod q-1. And in this case, we still know n. You also know e, but that doesn't really reveal much information in this case. And you want to recover the key. So the branch and prune algorithm works the same as before. You have to do a little bit more work. And the more work that you have is essentially to write out a new set of constraints from d mod p-1 and d mod q-1 that you know. But we in fact do get a pruning relationship that looks very much like what we had before. It's a little bit more complicated. So instead of p times q equals n, we get this complicated thing that's essentially e times d mod p-1 minus 1 plus the modular reduction integer multiplier times the same thing is equal to this. And so we have some new variables floating around. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse, but we have some new variables, kp and kq, that are the integers introduced by getting rid of the modular reduction in the relationship. And these are small. They're only e size. And in theory, we need to brute force, say, e squared values. And I said e equals at most 65537. So that's at most 2 to the 32 values. But actually, it turns out that you only have to brute force 2 to the 16 values. And then for each of these 2 to the 16 values, you get a guess for what these k sub p and k sub q are, and you can apply the branch and prune algorithm. You might worry what happens with the branch and prune algorithm with an incorrect guess for these values kp and kq. But it turns out that if you have the wrong, guess, the possible solutions tend to get pruned out very quickly, and your tree becomes empty, and so you can just discard that guess very quickly. So
when you move the mouse, we can see it.
When I move the mouse, you can see it? Okay, so I can use it as a pointer. Good. All right, I will do that. All right. So here's a fun application of this to the cache bleed attack. So OpenSSL in 2016 included several cache timing countermeasures. They used fixed window exponentiation, and they scattered multipliers in memory. However, after OpenSSL implemented these countermeasures, Intel introduced cache banks to serve different parts of the cache, and the cache bank conflicts produced timing differences even in this supposedly constant time implementation. And so for windowed exponentiation, this leaked the 3 least significant bits out of every 5 bits of d mod p minus 1 and d mod q minus 1. And this is 60% of the bits correlated, but there were basically only sort of chunks of 2 bits at a time that we didn't know. And 60% is well above 50%, so this is incredibly fast with branch and prune. And so as just a concrete example, a 4096-bit key took 3.5 minutes to recover on 36 cores, and almost all of that time was just running through the 2 to the 16 possible values for the multipliers. So that's fun. But I've only been talking about using explicit known bits of the key. What happens if you don't have enough explicitly known bits? So this came up in a 2017 paper with a number of authors. And in this case, we were looking at the libgcrypt sliding window exponentiation of modular exponentiation. And it's not constant time. And a flush and reload cache attack leaks the square and multiply sequence. And the square and multiply sequence was computed left to right. So I've put a little diagram here of like the multipliers and then the sequence of squares and multiplies that's computed. And so you can derive a few rules, like if there's a 1 in the location where you would have a multiplier, where you would have one of these sliding window multipliers, then there's definitely a multiply. And then if there are squaring operations that are not within where there could be a multiplier, then those bits are definitely 0. So you get some fraction of the bits, but if you compute how many bits you are leaked, it's about 40%, which is not enough to recover the secret key from the directly leaked bits. So this is annoying from the attacker's perspective. But it turns out that there's a lot more information here than the directly leaked bits, because we still have the whole sequence of squares and multiplies, even though we don't know what the multipliers are. And so if you use the sequence of squares and multiplies as sort of implicit information to filter the key possibilities, then this allows efficient key recovery in this case. So the way this works is essentially computing the left to right sliding window squaring multiply sequence is monotonic in the sense that if you have, if you're lined up at the beginning of a window, you will compute the same sequence of squares and multiplies as the ground truth. And if you're not lined up properly with a window, there might be a little bit of difference in the beginning, but eventually the windows will line up and you'll have the same sequence of squares and multiplies. And so if you imagine that we are sort of brute forcing bits of d mod p minus 1 and d mod q minus 1, then we can, for each guess of bits that we've brute forced for these values, we can compute the square and multiply sequence that is induced by this guess and compare it to the ground truth measurement that we got from the side channel attack and see whether it matches or not. And it won't match exactly, but we can use the length of the matching sequence to prioritize iteration through the tree. And if you do that, you can actually compute the amount of information that is revealed by the square and multiply sequence on, say, a random sequence of bits. And the amount of information is more than 50% per bit. And so this algorithm is efficient. So this is a case of using sort of implicit information to prune the tree rather than explicit information. So we're no longer using like fixed known bits. We're using the fact that we know that the square and multiply sequence should line up after a certain point. Another example of using this kind of implicit information that arose recently was in the copycat attack. So this was joint work with Daniel Mogini and Johan Wilk and Frank Piesens and Berg Sunar from this year. And the copycat attack, I won't go into all the details of the attack, but the effect of the side channel was that you could observe the sequence of branches that was executed in the code. To apply this to cryptanalysis, we were looking at the binary extended Euclidean algorithm implementation. And this algorithm operates bitwise from the least significant bit. And so we could apply the same technique to recover the secrets, essentially by computing the instruction sequence on a partial guess and comparing to the ground truth. And so a couple of specific applications, we could do very simple key recovery from observing the sequence of operations on the computation of Q inverse mod P, essentially by guessing bits of P and Q. And you can prune based off of two pieces of information, P times Q should equal N. And you can also look at the partial instruction sequence to compute Q inverse mod P. And a slightly more complicated example is key recovery from the computation of E inverse mod P minus 1 Q minus 1. So this is the computation that's actually, that the implementation is using to compute the secret key when it's generating the key pair. And for this one, you would guess bits of P and Q, and you can prune based off of the relationship P times Q equals N, and then the instruction sequence to compute E inverse mod P minus 1 Q minus 1 for the bits of P and Q that you know so far. So this requires a little bit more brute forcing and is slower, but it still works. These are a couple of applications of this idea, but I have not worked out a more general theory for this kind of branch and prune with explicit information. So we need, and I think it would be interesting to do so. It would be essentially the property that you need for this to work in your own side channel applications is that you're using some measurement that can be computed sort of monotonically from the least significant bits. In that if you have a partial guess for your secret key value, some of the least significant bits of your secret key values, then that should match the ground truth guess, the ground truth information that is coming out of the side channel. And you want there to be enough information leaked out of this. And I don't have a good way of describing what I mean by sort of this information can be computed sort of monotonically from the least significant bits. So here's an open problem for people who want to think about this kind of problem in an algorithmic sense. These algorithms also fail entirely if you don't have redundancy in the information. So if your side channel attack is leaking, say, only bits of P or only partial information about P, but you learn nothing about Q, if this information is sort of like non-contiguous and that there's a lot of missing bits or missing chunks, then these algorithms can do nothing, essentially. This, if you try to compute a tree here, you're going to branch on every unknown bit of P. There's nothing to prune with. And so these algorithms basically totally fail. From the perspective of the lattice methods that I'm going to talk about in the next section, it seems like you should have enough information to be able to uniquely solve this problem. But we don't have a good solution for it. And this is something that comes up a lot in concrete side channel research. So The next family of algorithms that I want to talk about is the Coppersmith-Hargrave-Graham family of lattice-based techniques for partial key recovery. So this technique works best for large contiguous chunks of an RSA key. And you're often exploiting the algebraic relationships between the fields of the RSA key, but you don't have any need for information from multiple key fields, unlike the branch and prune algorithms. So the canonical application of this is, again, if we have, say, partial information about, say, only one of the prime factors p of n, say the most significant bits. If we have half of the most significant bits of p, then we can factor n in polynomial time. So this is from Coppersmith's 1996 paper. The same is true very easily if we only know the least significant bits of p. You just multiply by a factor of 2, and it's the exact same technique. So Coppersmith's theorem, which I totally found like amazing the first time that I saw this, is essentially if you have half of the bits most or least significant, or even if you have an unknown chunk of middle bits, I'll talk about that in a little bit, then you can factor n in polynomial time. This is not at all obvious, right? Like, you know, factoring is supposed to be hard. We have, you know, sub-exponential time algorithms for factoring, but the fact that if you get half of the bits, it's just suddenly polynomial time, and that the running time essentially seems to go from sub-exponential to exponential, and then polynomial time, like right at that threshold, is kind of incredible. These algorithms, a lot of people find them very scary because they are lattices. So I'm going to walk through like a very short concrete example just to show you that they are not scary at all. And in fact, it's very simple. But this is something of a magic trick, and I've written this in Sage. So hopefully you guys feel happy with Sage notation. So we here I've generated 2 random primes of 512 bits, p and q. And then I generate my RSA modulus n. And then I compute this value a, which is basically the most significant bits of p. And I've taken, there's like 82 bits missing of p at the end. So that's like too much to brute force. I've given the side channel analysts a lot of information, but they still can't solve this problem from brute force. Now, I'm going to construct a matrix. It's a 3x3 matrix, and it consists of essentially just, I have the scaling factor, which is 2 to the 86. This is the number of bits that I don't know. And so the matrix entries are the scaling factor, includes some A's, and then the modulus n. And then I run the LLL lattice basis reduction algorithm on this matrix, which is actually a lattice basis. And when it comes out, I construct a polynomial from the coefficients of the least significant, or of the shortest vector that came out of this lattice basis reduction algorithm. And I compute the roots over the integers. And if I add the first root that I find to this value a, this is equal to p. So this is my lattice magic trick. And what this is doing, this is implementing the simplest possible case for partial key recovery using essentially Hargrave-Graham's method. So in full generality, the theorem is, you know, given a degree d polynomial and some integer n, we can find roots, mod, divisors, integer divisors of n that are sufficiently small, where small is measured in terms of the size of the divisor. So this beta is between 0 and 1. And so the size of the root that we can find is n to the beta squared divided by the degree of the polynomial. So in the previous example, what I was doing was constructing a polynomial of the form a plus x. So this is a degree 1 polynomial. And I'm trying to find a solution that vanishes mod one of the prime factors of n, which is approximately the square root of n. So we have beta equals 1/2. And the theorem says that we can find a root of size n to the 1/2 squared over 1, which is n to the 1/4, which is half of the bits of p. So it could take a full hour to do, the entire, talk about this in full generality. So I'm going to sketch it and wave my hands vigorously just to give a flavor of what's going on. What I did in my example was I constructed a lattice basis, a matrix of coefficient vectors of powers of the polynomial that I constructed and n. I ran a lattice basis reduction algorithm on this lattice. And then I constructed a polynomial from the shortest vector. And then I found the roots of this polynomial and I examined each of them to see if any of them were the solution that I was looking for. So concretely in the example, the lattice basis, this is the coefficient vectors of x times f of x. This is the coefficient vector of f of x, and this is the coefficient vector of n. I can compute the dimension and the determinant of this lattice. I had this magic factor r, which I called capital X in the example, and this is just so that the polynomial evaluated at my root is bounded by the L1 norm of the vector in the lattice. So ignoring approximation factors, I can basically expect to solve this when the size of the vector that I get is less than p, and so I can just compute the bounds. And what I got here was that this 3×3 lattice can solve the problem when the size of the root that we're trying to find is less than n to the 1/6, and that is exactly what I had in the example. So I think because these results are often presented in full generality in the papers that people are publishing about them, they look very scary. But the fact that you can actually do something highly non-trivial with just a 3×3 lattice, I think is not as widely known as it should be. So I'm telling all of you so that you feel empowered to implement this in your next side channel paper. Of course, n to the 1/6 is not n to the 1/4. And so in order to achieve the fully general bound, you do have to construct a larger lattice. You add additional dimensions by asking your roots to vanish to higher multiplicities and allowing higher degree polynomials. The specific calculations of how to do this are a little bit annoying. So I'm going to wave my hands at this point. And it's a little bit of a black art figuring out the right construction to use here. But of course, the most fun recent application of this technique was the Roca attack, the return of coppersmiths attack by these lovely Czech researchers from 2017, who noticed after doing an extremely extensive analysis of dozens and dozens of smart card RSA generation data sets. They generated like millions upon millions of keys and looked at the different properties of the RSA keys that were being generated by different implementations of RSA on and off smart cards and different cryptographic libraries. And while they were doing this, they noticed that Infineon smart cards had this particular property where the primes had fixed remainders mod many different primes. And in fact, this is because the smart cards were generating RSA primes of an extremely constrained form. There was this this fixed integer m that had, and this is a primorial, so this is a known value. And then the primes that they were generated were essentially of the form 65537 to the raised to the some integer power mod m plus a remainder. And with this highly constrained form, essentially, if they were able to brute force this value a, then this allows a Coppersmith-Halgrave-Graham type attack because they know this large amount of information about the prime, and so then they have to essentially solve for this value k. So this was obviously extremely high impact. And there's definitely a question of what else is out there, given that there were these strange RSA implementation choices being made. So that's great. There's a theoretical question here, which is that what happens if you know fewer than half the bits of P? And the answer is we don't know. This is an open problem. So like, is it actually hard in any sense to factor with fewer than half the bits of P, or d mod P minus 1, or any of these values, since it's equivalent? So it is. I have a paper. This is with Ted Schimberg and Brett Hemingway and Zachary Scher from 2016, looking at Coppersmith's original simplest version of his theorem, which is looking for univariate roots of univariate polynomials modulo n, so not divisors of n. And we were able to show that for this case, Coppersmith's bound is optimal in the sense that any method that constructs an auxiliary polynomial that preserves some algebraic properties of the roots and the original polynomials cannot do better than Coppersmith's bound. But these techniques don't seem to apply naively, or even not naively yet, to looking at the case of looking for solutions modulo divisors. So this is kind of an open problem. Is there an equivalent bound for factoring with partial knowledge, or the sort of the Halgrave-Graham setting, where you can show that essentially there's no variant of Coppersmith Halgrave-Graham type methods that extend to this setting? So I mentioned that factoring from d mod P minus 1 is essentially equivalent to factoring from n, and it's very similar. So you essentially use the RSA equations that I showed in the branch and prune case to essentially rewrite, like write down a simple polynomial, and here we have a simple linear polynomial with a small amount of brute forcing, 16 bits, and we're looking for a solution mod P. And so this is sort of exactly the same setting as before. So this follows straightforwardly. What about factoring with chunks of P? You might not get, say, the least significant bits or most significant bits. What if you know like bits in the middle? So in this case, if the bits that you don't know are in the middle and it's fewer than half the bits, then this is a simple extension of what we were talking before. The polynomial is just you shift over the unknown piece that you're looking for by the appropriate number of bits, and everything follows the way you want. But if I flip this so that the chunk of bits that we know is in the middle and the unknown chunks are in the least and most significant bits, suddenly this is more annoying. So it's still possible to solve this with lattices. But so now we have to write down essentially a bivariate polynomial. So there's like some known value in the middle, and we're looking for two roots, R1 and R2. And you can write this down, and you can write down the appropriate lattice, and you run into a few problems, like you have to pull out multiple equations now from the lattice, not just one, and you have to solve a system of multivariate polynomials. So for 2 or 3 variables, this isn't that bad, and you can write down the explicit bounds that you get here, which is a little bit worse than the previous case. And of course, you can also apply this in practice. So here's a fun application. In 2013, some Taiwanese researchers noticed that the smart card infrastructure had generated some poorly generated RSA keys, in the sense that they had common divisors. And these common divisors were arising because the random number generators were flawed on these cards, and they were getting stuck. And so if they got stuck and produced exactly the same sequence of values, then they would produce identical keys, or keys that had exactly the same factors. But sometimes the random number generators would get unstuck for a short period and produce a different sequence. And so we showed that even in this case, if you sort of guess where they would produce different subsequences, we could use the Coppersmith-Halgrave-Graham type framework to guess these locations and factor the keys just from the known sequence of bits from when the random number generators were stuck. So this was kind of a fun paper. And what it appears was that there was some kind of like chaotic oscillator that would get stuck in particular periods. So this was like it could have a period of 3, 5, or 7 bits that were just repeating. And so to guess the sequence of bits, we were just brute forcing all sequences of that period and then modifying it according to the format of the keys. So a case that comes up in a lot of side channel papers is, okay, let's keep trying to extend this. So what if you have like more chunks? You can extend the methods by adding more variables. Your lattice size is going to blow up. It's still possible. So these run in heuristic polynomial time. But if you increase the number of chunks too much, essentially these algorithms are exponential in the number of unknown chunks. And so it gets really annoying. So I wouldn't recommend trying to solve this in practice for more than some relatively small fixed number of chunks. And you can work out the bounds for what you get. So Herman and May did this in 2008, actually. And that's fun. But you still run into the issue of, we're going back to sort of the open problem that I mentioned for the branch and prune case of what if we just have like many non-contiguous bits of information about only P. Again, these lattice techniques scale poorly because they run exponential in exponential time in the number of chunks. So if you have like a 512 or a 1024 bit P and you know every other bit, then this is not a technique that you want to use there. And so it would be very interesting to essentially unify these bounds. It seems information theoretically like the sort of Coppersmith-Halgrave-Graham techniques should apply if you can use, if you have half the bits of P, why does it matter where they are? But it does seem to matter. So there's an open problem to assume to improve the methods here, or say something non-trivial about this case. So I've gotten to my last sort of vignette, which is the hidden number problem set of techniques, which are used for many, many papers to do ECDSA key recovery from the bits of the signature nonce, if you can observe many signatures. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll do this for ECDSA. An ECDSA signature, the secret key is just an integer. There's some public parameters that specify the elliptic curve in your base point. Your public key is your secret key multiplied by your base point in some representation. And then to generate a signature, you're signing the hash of some message, and the signatures are famously randomized. So you're generating essentially this nonce or an ephemeral secret key K, and you compute the point K times G, and then the X coordinate of that is the first portion of the signature, and then the second portion of the signature is essentially like this linear relationship. So this is an integer relationship between your signature nonce, your message hash, and your secret key, and the first half of the signature. So that's ECDSA. So the attack scenario for ECDSA is your attacker is observing some side channel information during signature generation, and they can observe information about the signature nonce K. And they want to efficiently recover the secret key D. So of course, if they can observe the entire secret nonce, then it is trivial to compute the secret key just by solving the signature itself for the secret key D, once you know the signature nonce K. So, but sort of what is not obvious is that if you know just a few bits of many signature nonces, you can recover the secret key. And if you know enough bits, this is a polynomial time algorithm using lattices. So I'll set this up, and I'll set this up in the way that I think about it, which is a little bit different. We can think about this, we can sort of think about it in a very similar way to the Coppersmith-Halgrave-Graham type techniques. So we have a set of signatures on known message hashes, and then we have some unknown values, which are the signature nonces and the secret key. And we can write down a sequence of linear equations in the unknown signature nonces in the secret key, and then the known portions of the signature in the message hash. And we essentially get a system of equations that we want to solve. And they're linear. You know, if the attacker has learned some most significant bits of the signature nonces, then we have some known most significant bits and some unknown least significant bits. And so we can write down the sequence of equations in the, say, unknown least significant bits and the secret key. And this sort of formulation of a system of linear equations that looks like this, where we have like small variables here and the same unknown variable here. This is a reformulation of what's called the hidden number problem. So the value D is the hidden number that we're trying to solve for, and then there are these other small variables here. So there are various techniques to solve the hidden number problem. There's two main families of algorithms. I'm going to focus on the lattice-based algorithm for solving it. So our input is this set of linear equations. We essentially dump the coefficients of these linear equations into a lattice that looks like this. And so you can see these coefficients here. You can see the modulus of the system that we're looking for, and you can see the bound of the value that we're looking for. And our desired solution is a short vector in this lattice. And so we're going to hope to find this by running a lattice basis reduction algorithm. And so you can compute the dimension and the determinant of this construction. And ignoring, again, constants and approximation factors, a lattice basis reduction algorithm, we know the size of the vector that we expect to find in it. And we know the size of the vector that we're hoping to find. And so if this target vector is significantly shorter than the expected size of a vector from a random lattice, then we'll expect to find it. So the usual way that this is phrased is that we expect to find the solution when it's the unique shortest vector in the lattice. So this lattice algorithm has many advantages from a cryptanalytic perspective. It's very straightforward to implement. It's efficient for many parameters, and it requires relatively few samples. So to give a historical example, this is from, I think, Nguyen and Liu. It takes fewer than 100 samples to solve for 2 bits known on a 160-bit curve. However, there's also some conventional wisdom that lattices cannot solve some parameters. And so for these parameters, you resort to an alternative algorithm, which is Bleikenbacher's Fourier analysis-based approach. The downside of this algorithm is it requires many, 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 many more samples. Like 2 to the 30, 2 to the 40 is the number of samples that is used for some of the record-setting computations. And it's more complex to implement also. But you know, if you wanted to solve a 1-bit bias for a 160-bit curve, like this is the algorithm that you need to use. And I want to show kind of the computations that lead people to believe that lattices don't apply, which is, this is a little bit of a complex algorithm or a complex plot, but we have essentially, this is the expected length of the vector in of the shortest vector in the lattice that we construct. And then we can compute, as we vary the number of samples, we can compute the expected length of the target, or we can compute an upper bound on the length of the target vector that we're looking for in the lattice. And so when these curves cross over, that determines the number of samples that you expect to need to solve in the lattice vector. So what this plot suggests is that to solve for a 3-bit bias for a 256-bit curve, you expect to need to solve the shortest vector problem for like 130 something dimensional lattice, which is hard, but possibly feasible with like a lot of computation. But this also suggests, if you look at the sort of asymptotics here, like a 1-bit bias, just like you expect this never to cross over. It crosses over at like such a huge dimension of a lattice that it's just not going to be feasible. So this is what led people to believe that, say, solving for a 1-bit bias with a 256-bit curve is just impossible with lattices. And so I have some new work with Martin Albrecht. It is not online yet, but it will be online very soon, that I'm kind of excited about, which is essentially, it turns out that this lattice barrier is not as impenetrable as people believed. So we have kind of two observations in this work. First, the solution vector is in the lattice somewhere, and you don't have to just use lattice reduction as a black box. You can actually use more sophisticated techniques like lattice sieving or enumeration to find it. And we know what the right algorithm, what the right answer is, because we have the public key. We can just check all of the solution vectors for the public key, whether they match the, if they're the secret key, whether they match the public key. And it turns out that if also these vector length estimates are overly pessimistic. So you can, if you redo them just using the expected length of the vector, which matches what you observe experimentally, the estimates are much more favorable. So for the 3-bit bias case, you expect to need to solve shortest vector problem in dimension less than 100, which is it is eminently feasible at this point. And the observation in these first 2 bullet points means that we can actually push further here if you're willing to do more work. And same for these other cases. So solving a 2-bit bias with a 256-bit curve requires solving shortest vector problem in 132 dimensions, which is hard, but should be feasible. And even, a 1-bit bias is likely still very hard, but it's not actually impossible. So it is not out of the question that this problem may someday become solvable. So a little bit about the lattice sieving and enumeration. These algorithms, so lattice enumeration allows you to exhaustively search all lattice vectors within a radius. And the test that we're going to do is essentially like search out within some radius. You're going to enumerate exponentially many vectors and check, do they contain the secret key? And if so, then we found it. And then a lattice sieving algorithm, so many shortest vector solvers, as a side effect of computing the shortest vector in the lattice, they actually could produce a database already of all vectors of norm, there should be a square root here, square root 4/3 times the length of the expected shortest vector. And so in this case, we can actually just search through the exponentially many vectors in this database. We don't just have to rely on having the shortest vector. So what we're doing in this paper is essentially opening up the black box shortest vector solvers and using these algorithms to search for solutions that are not necessarily the shortest vector. So this allows us to push past the parameters that people thought were these algorithms just wouldn't be solvable. As a side effect, this means that the lattice technique also deals much more gracefully with errors than people believed in the literature. So it was believed that the lattice-based hidden number problem solvers didn't deal well with errors because if you got an error, your vector was unlikely to be the shortest one anymore in the lattice, and therefore you ran into issues. But sort of as a natural consequence of this viewpoint that we can just keep searching through the lattice for the solution, if you have an estimate of the error rate that tells you the length of the vector that you expect to find, and it tells you the size of the search radius that you need to look through. And so your desired solution is going to be found within this radius. And so you just look at the running time to search through this radius in your lattice. So we have an implementation of this that we're planning to release, and what we hope is that this is the lattice-based hidden number problem solver to end all lattice-based hidden number problem solvers. So the literature is full of people having to painfully re-implement this algorithm and, you know, arbitrarily choosing, oh, we're going to run it with BKZ block size 30 and making arbitrary choices there. And so hopefully we will keep you from ever having to do that again. You can just run our algorithm for all of your elliptic curve DSA and normal DSA side channel needs. So, you know, just to finish up the case of like ECDSA key recovery, you know, I spent the whole time talking about most significant bits. Least significant bits follow easily from most significant bits. The bounds are basically the same. Middle bits, a little bit more annoying if you can't ship them. So this is my last slide. So this is kind of the summary of the techniques that I talked about. So we have a couple families of techniques for RSA. There's the lattice techniques that require large blocks of contiguous bits and no redundancy. There's branch and prune that requires, that can deal with non-contiguous bits, but it requires redundancy. For DSA, there's the lattice techniques, which require relatively few samples and several bits known. There's the Fourier analysis techniques that require many, many samples, but fewer bits known. I didn't really mention this, but it's such a cool attack that I wanted to put it on the slides anyway. The hidden number problem techniques also apply to the setting of knowing most significant bits of Diffie-Hellman, and the raccoon attack paper, they recently found an actual application in the wild for that would allow a side channel attacker to learn the most significant bits of a Diffie-Hellman shared secret and use a lattice-based hidden number problem solver to solve this. So that is super fun. So the open problems that I mentioned were sort of the gaps between these techniques where, you know, we didn't have good techniques to solve it. So in the DSA case, like if you have like many bits spread throughout the nonce, we're again sort of out of luck. And this is something that comes up. So this would be interesting cases to solve. So that is all that I have. So thank you very much.
Good, very nice presentation. Thank you, Nadia. So it's time for a few questions because we are nearby the end of the hour. So anyone? So I checked the chat. There is no question on the chat. So any question for Nadia? Maybe people are tired for...
There's a lot of math for the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe. That's a good introduction for tomorrow sessions about side channel and faults.
What if bits are known with a certain probability only? So if bits are known with a probability, you can use the probability to prioritize the guesses in your search trees. So so this works in the branch and prune case. So what you would like to do is like compute the maximum likelihood solution and then iterate through the tree from the maximum likelihood solution. So the paper of Patterson, Polychroniadou, and Siborn from 2012 did this in a sort of rigorous way, if you want the fixed bounds. Same for recovered bits with noise. So if there's if you have noise, you can compute the likelihood of the solution based off of you know, the probability of there being an error in any location, and then you can prioritize your guesses based off of the likelihood of the noise, and you can do that. I think there was a paper at Crypto 2010, I think, that was doing this. I forget the authors. Let's see. Recovering DP and GQ with blinding. That one, unless you know something about the blinding factor. So I could imagine a setting where blinding is implemented poorly, and so you're able to observe something about the blinding value as a variable, and maybe you could write down a sequence of, like another sequence of equations with the blinding value as another variable that you're trying to solve for. So that one, that would be unknown. That would be future work for somebody to find a setting where this is possible. Let's see. Hidden number problem. Is it possible to derive some general trade-off between error rate and required size of lattice dimension for the key recovery to succeed with good probability? Yes. So so what you can do with the error rate, we haven't written down this like fully formally in the paper, but for a given error rate, the thing that you would do is you can compute the expected length of the vector, and then you can and then you can basically compute, as you vary the number of samples, what the length of the radius that you would have to search through is in the lattice, and the amount of work required to search through the lattice in that dimension. And so that would give you, for a given problem instance, the trade-off between the number of samples that you need and the running time to do this. So it's based off of just computing the expected length of the vector with errors, and then the amount of work to search through the radius in the lattice with those parameters. The implementation. Okay, so I should have put this online, but I got distracted by working on the slides of this talk. So our paper is at the point where we just need to read through it a couple more times, and then we'll plan to post it on ePrint. So hopefully we will post it on ePrint within this week. And then there will be a link from the paper to the implementation, which will be on GitHub. So yeah. Can we make a general statement about what is typically the scarce resource, memory or computation? This definitely varies by case, problem, and type. So if you're trying to do like a branch and prune tree, if you have to store large portions of the tree, eventually you run out of memory. And this is going to be, there's not good solution. I mean, you can do a depth first search to save somewhat on memory, but essentially you're going to be bound by the width of the tree that you generate. And for the lattice algorithms, you're bound by computation, essentially. Like you couldn't fill up a terabyte of RAM with a lattice and then run a shortest vector algorithm on it. So it definitely depends.
Okay. Look at the Mattermost. No question on Mattermost. I think it's we can. So maybe one short question. Okay. So thank you very much, Nadia. It was really a very nice talk with lot of work. Really a lot of work. Thank you for sharing that statement, I would say, on so many attack techniques. Okay, and so it's time to close this session, so everyone can finish the day restfully. Okay, thank you very much, Nadia.
Thank you.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Yes,
Bye.
yes, of course. Thomas, maybe one word for tomorrow?
Yes, we'll resume at 2 p.m. Central European time or 8 a.m. US East Coast time. in the same way as today. The only thing that changes is the YouTube link. So the link for YouTube will be different. You can check that out on the website. Otherwise, you can join through GatherTown, enter the WebEx live sessions. And I hope that it should be smooth this time. So at this point, it's already smooth. Let's just hope that the servers hold up. But I think so, right? I mean, WebEx is a big service, so we shouldn't expect any new problems. So thanks, everybody. Thanks all the speakers of today. I think it was we had a great day. And yeah, see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. or 10 a.m. if you're on the US East Coast.
Okay. Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You can still enjoy in GatherTown if you want, so we'll keep that open, right? So if you want to walk around and interact with people, the possibility is there. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.